I'm really interested in what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome on your own journey, which have led you to where you are now, and particularly in your work.
So let me just start by saying I started Transformation Through Trauma because it was born out of this idea of I was photographing athletes. I was kind of did this on the side and I enjoyed it. It was fine. But then there comes this point in you or this tug in your heart where you're like, I want to do something more. And I had begun to see athletes like would come to me and would spend this time photographing them. And they would share with me these stories, traumatic stories of like how they were using fitness to overcome whatever their trauma was. And I started praying about a way, like, how can I use my gift or my work to be more purpose driven, really? And so that's kind of how Transformation Through Trauma, the project, was born. What it is actually photographing people in their trauma and then photographing people in their triumph. So it's an artistic expression. It's kind of a way for them to artistically express themselves in being able to let go of, release some of the trauma in their past. And then they have these images that then they look back on and they say, hey, I was this and now I'm this. And some of these things I did not think through. It's been taking one step in front of the other because I didn't know that these things this was going to be so impactful until I started working with clients. And then I seen how impactful it was. Still, for years, I kept this on the back burner. I was still photographing athletes. I was still doing like branding stuff, working, shooting events, doing all kinds of different things in photography. And I had these sessions on the back burner. And it wasn't until I would say towards the fall of last year, I had gone to a business event and I ran into a mentor there, and we were talking and he's like, you're not passionate about any of these things you're doing in photography. You're passionate about this transformation through trauma, but you're not even really marketing this. This is on the back burner. And I thought, yeah, but I'm building these other things and I don't know how to monetize this. And I'm a single mom. And so I just put it, I still kind of like planted a seed, but it was still off. Well, when a month later, I got invited to come out and photograph a retreat. And this is a retreat in the BVI where it's a private island where entrepreneurs come to really get downloads of, how they can go into the world and make a bigger impact. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people that are very purpose driven. And there was a speaker there that day, and she told me, she said, you have this project. She didn't know me other than just I'm a photographer at the event. And she said, you have this something you're working on that has two parts. And she said, that's the thing. She said, I have a dream about you. And she said, I've seen that you're working on something that has two parts. And that's the thing you need to run with. So from that point, I come back from that retreat. I knew immediately she's talking about transformation through trauma. And that's when I started my own podcast. That's when I really started like pushing for this. And I'm still learning in the process of it, it's been challenging. It's been challenging on multiple levels. There's the level of just building a whole new business that's different than what I've been doing. It's similar. I'm still photographing, but it's different because now it's emotional. And I've got to be careful not to push people into a negative place of trauma. So there's a lot of things like that I'm trying to figure out. There's then on top of that, when I record my podcast, which people don't have to photograph with me to come on the podcast, I like to cover stories of trauma and triumph. So, and I feel like it's inspirational for people. But as I go back through and I do my own editing for the podcast right now, I do editing for the podcast, editing the photos, even like it's really hard because I'm an empath and I carry people's emotions, and I having to figure out how to decipher, like not carry the weight of people's trauma. And that's been a learning experience. That's been hard. So there's been a lot that comes with the project, but it's so rewarding also, like so rewarding on the other side of that too, because I truly feel like it's helping people. And I mean, what else are we here for? That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, wow, awesome. It's almost like working with these people through photography and bringing a lens into their, well, not to make a cliche, but bringing a lens into their world has allowed them to in turn open up to you through this artistic tool or medium. That's a really awesome thing. But I can relate very much in the way that the trauma is delicate and how you handle that and balance that with everything. Not to overuse the word challenge, but it is challenging in itself. So what an awesome way for you to get a real insight into what's going on with people, and as you say, celebrate their triumphs through that artistic expression.
Yeah, it's been definitely a beautiful thing, because my vision with the entire project, when I started the pod, I'm like, my vision is to show people that you're not alone. And even with the photos before the podcast started, the photos of just like, hey, these are an artistic expression for my client, but then they're also for anyone who sees them. They're like, hey, I can relate to that, because it's very conceptual. I don't photograph. When I say I photograph their trauma, we're photographing the emotion, but a lot of it is like conceptual art. Like we're doing stuff that is representative of their trauma. So it makes people look at these images and they're like, what does that mean? So I feel like it helps on both sides. So it's a project I'm proud of, but again, it's been hard to navigate, and it's been hard to, carry the weight of it sometimes.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing, though, to show the contrast between the adversity and the triumph side by side, almost, I imagine.
Yeah.
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 To get into the nitty gritty of sharing one story, you've described it as three parts in a way: a signature story, an origin story, and a transformation story. Can you define those a little bit further, beginning with, the difference between them?
As I'm kind of working through this, working through how to really, storytelling is storytelling, right? So to tell an effective story, there's certain elements to tell an effective story. I truly believe that when I'm working with a client one-on-one, everyone has a transformation story. We all evolve. And just like we started out, and I'm like, well, what part do you want me to tell? It's like we all have this evolutional phase. Like there's certain things happen and we grow. Hopefully we grow from it, right? Another thing happens and then we grow. So we all have these like evolutionary phases. So I think everyone has transformation stories. Sometimes people have these dramatic, traumatic, like this is a line in the sand. I was this, now I'm this. But sometimes I find that people have these stories of like, this little thing happened and then this little thing happened. And that's kind of like more how my story is. Certain things have happened over the course of my life. So I think transformation stories can be anything. It can be super huge and it can be small, but still transformation stories. Transformation stories, I think, are very important because they do show people that you can transform, especially if someone's going through something a specific type of trauma that possibly you've gone through. Now you're on the other side. What gives them hope? So I believe that that's kind of what I would define as like a transformation story.
And it's kind of tricky to compartmentalize or box stories, I guess.
Very much.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, like, if you wanted to say the difference between, I think origin and signature is similar, very similar, but with the signature story, that's kind of like your overarching why. And I think businesses use this a lot to describe, like, this is my big reason, like, this is who I am, this is my purpose, my passion, the thing that I'm pushing towards, where an origin story is more of this is how it started, kind of what I just told you about how transformation through trauma started. I think that's more of an origin story, where a signature story is more of like my overarching purpose of what I'm doing and the mission behind what I'm doing.
They're obviously all intertwined.
Very much. Very much. Well, they're very close.
What's the biggest thing you think holds people back from sharing their stories? Would it be primarily fear?
Well, I think it depends on the type of story. So I do think that fear comes in, especially when it's a personal, vulnerable story, something that we have, that's maybe in the shadows that we don't really talk about. There is the fear of judgment. There's the fear of criticism. There's the fear of putting yourself out there. There's a lot of fear that surrounds that. But as far as, there's other types of story that I feel like people don't share just because they don't know how to share it. They don't really know. Like there was a long time I wasn't really clear on, like, okay, what should I be sharing and what's the fundamentals of sharing a story? Because there's, just like anything, there's fundamentals of, like, a lot of times why we don't do a certain thing is because we just don't know how to do it. So I think once you can help people know how to share it, they're a lot more open and willing to share.
That also comes back to artistic expression and what people's certain gifts are, and the best way for them to bring a light their story, which is often a tricky thing in itself to pinpoint. How am I best equipped to get this out there in a genuine and authentic way, finding your best form of artistic expression. But again, what you were doing through photography, what an awesome way to do it. Like, what an awesome example.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm excited about it because I feel like it's something that it's not out there a whole lot. I feel like artists, when you look at trauma and you look at how to kind of overcome trauma, art does play a big role. Therapy, if you look at the different modalities, different therapies that people use, sometimes, they'll encourage in trauma survivors or people that have overcome some type of trauma, especially the really intense traumas, they'll have them paint, or they'll have them go start taking pictures themselves, photographing. So I feel like this is a different way of, it's almost like they can step into a different persona. They can be this person for a day, but then they have for a lifetime to look back on these images and say, this was me, and my greatest reward when I'm photographing someone, my greatest reward is for them to look at their pictures and say, that's me, like, I can't believe that's me. That doesn't even look like me. But it is. I'm like, no, that's you. That's just you. The story you tell yourself is that this is not you, but this is you. We've shot you in this powerful, confident, that's you. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to share that with people. I feel like photography it's almost like makeup, right? Like, when I put my makeup on, I'm not trying to be a different person. I'm just trying to accentuate what I are, like my face. I'm just trying to accentuate the different features of my face. And I feel like photography done well is that I never try to go in and change someone, or like, hey, let me have you act to become a whole different person. But hey, let me have you bring out those natural things. And this takes getting to know your client too. And I do extensive before the transformation through trauma sessions, we do extensive planning because I want to know that person. And I think once you get to know that person, you can then start bringing out these, you can accentuate. Same thing with fitness. It's so funny because I shoot a lot of fitness athletes that do like competitions and bodybuilders and things. And I'm never trying to like put muscle on them or add muscle, but I can put my lighting in such a way that it accentuates their muscle, accentuates the cuts. So when I tell people, they're like, that's me. I'm like, yeah, that's you. I didn't Photoshop anything. I just accentuated what you have. So I think that's the beauty of it. And when you work with someone who understands that, it's about bringing out the accentuating what's already there.
You would agree, right, that great purpose can come through one's story. So, if somebody's searching for purpose, well, the answer might be within their own story. It sounds simple, but it's not.
Right. Well, so I agree with you 100%. I think it definitely comes with tapping back into your story, and not just the story of your past, but the story that you're telling yourself consistently. Because we always have this internal dialogue that's going on in our heads, and we have to be careful not to let that overtake us. We have to be able to control that, right? So you don't want to tell yourself the wrong story. But I definitely believe that when you can, I am hesitant to use this word, but it's almost like tear into your past, tear into the things that maybe, you've heard of like shadow work. People don't want to get into the shadow work of themselves. Like they don't even want to face it. They just want to stuff it away. And it's like, there's so much value there, but it takes work and it takes strength and it takes courage to say, hey, I'm going to dig this stuff out and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to figure out. But that's where your power lies. That's where your purpose lies. And I can truly attest to this. I had a conversation with a friend last night and I said, I have this theory that people heal from a lot of times from their trauma by helping other people heal from that same trauma. Like you're over it, you're in a safe place now, and the trauma may still bother you, but by you being able to help someone else through it, it also heals you. And she's like, I agree. She's had a very traumatic story herself. And she said, yeah. And I actually had a counselor tell me the same thing. So I'm like, well, I'm glad of that. But I think that's true. I'll tell you this. I heard an analogy recently. I thought it was so powerful. It stuck with me. But the guy was talking about how, a trash can, like he said, we put trash in a trash can. And he said, when it gets full, sometimes we just want to press it down and deposit more trash, until eventually it overflows. It erupts like the bag erupts when you pull it out. It's just, it's messy. And it's like, but if you take that trash out on a regular basis, you don't have that problem. And he said, this is what we do with our emotions. Like we'll stuff it until it gets so full that eventually like those emotions, that trauma, those things that we've dealt with our whole life, they're going to manifest in some way. They're going to come out in our life in some way. So, and who knows when that could be. But if we take it out on a regular basis and we dispose of it, like get rid of it, then, we don't have that problem. And I think that I thought it was such a beautiful analogy because it's so true. It's like we as humans, we want to take these things that hurt us or bother us or make us angry or whatever that we've faced or somebody that's done us wrong. And it's just like, instead of dealing with it, we just stuff it. We put it in a little box deep down in our, in our psyche. And then eventually it comes out in the wrong times, in the wrong places. And it's not healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've realized recently the importance of distance from things as well. I've realized in my own past that when I was caught in things, it wasn't necessarily the best time. I know that it can be sort of cathartic if you're in the middle of something and you try and deal with it. But I've also realized how important, as you mentioned, to have enough distance from it to realize what it can potentially offer, and to have healed from it, whatever it may be, in a with enough distance there, so that you can then potentially help others with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the challenges with the transformation through trauma project, because I've had to learn how to read people enough to know, like, you're not really on the other side of this enough to dive into this. Like, it could be detrimental to you. I had a girl reach out to me. She's wanting to do a shoot, and her struggle was infertility, and they've struggled really a lot with infertility. And she said, I said, I just don't think you're at this place yet. She couldn't even talk about it without crying. And I, I'm probably not the right person for someone who's not on the right side of it, on the other side of it. But I want to be able to provide resources. And that's one of the reasons why, when I started my podcast and I'm interviewing people that have these platforms or have these coaching things or counseling or, their therapist or whatever, I want to be able to I don't want to leave people with no resource. Like, hey, at least let me send you a resource. I might not be the person to work with you, but let me send you to someone who can. Because you're right. That's you have to be really careful dealing with people's traumas, for sure.
And that's another thing is, how does one, if they're courageous enough to venture there, how does one then get that into a public realm?
I think every person on this earth needs therapy, because we live in a human existence and our lives are not perfect. And so we've all been through things, and I think therapy can benefit everybody. So I'm the first one to say, like, hey, go sit with a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I just help you express yourself. But that's one of the first questions I ask clients is, have you been through therapy? And what does your therapist say? Have you spoke to your therapist about doing a project like this? Because that is something we got to be really careful. And I would say the first step would be to sit down and talk to someone and be sure you're on the other end of it. And there's different modalities too. It's not that you necessarily have to sit with a therapist. There's, I've interviewed people that do like energy healing, people that do like, Reiki or different somatic type of healing. And any of these people, that's where I would start, is by exploring these different modalities for healing and then getting a feel for where you're at. But I do think innately people know too. They know, like, I'm at a healthy place where I can talk about this and it's not going to destroy me. I can dive into this, but I'm also very vigilant when I'm working with someone not to press into areas and I let them know up front. If we press into any area that is uncomfortable or that's making you upset or you feel triggered, let me know, because we won't do that. So I try to put all those safeguards into these areas so that we don't do that. But I would say starting would just be starting with some type of therapy.
Yeah, I've always said that I think therapy is kind of courageous in itself. There can be some stigmas around it and so on, but to have a professional with an objective view of things, who's not necessarily emotionally attached and can see things objectively and piece things together, it's from my own experience, was really beneficial at the time that I needed it. But there's also, like you say, there's so many different ways somebody can step into that discomfort. And then be in a position where they're ready like you say.
Yeah, and just explore it. There's no one size fits all people. So you have to kind of explore what works. It's like when there's a million different ways to start a diet, right? But we have to um, try to explore those different options and find the thing that works for us. And I think therapy is just the same. We got to just explore it till we find what works.
How important is intuition to you?
I would say 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's everything. It's so funny because when I first started doing these photographs and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was even really scared to ask people, like, hey, you have this story. To be open? The very first girl that I photographed she had lost a child, and her child was 13 months old when she lost her baby. And it was very fast. They found out she had cancer, and in like a week, I think it was a week. It might have been 2. I can't remember, but it was very short amount of time, and she lost her child, and it had been 10 years, but I was still really scared. Like, I would love to photograph her story. And it's so funny because when I reached out to her, it was like, I'm not religious, but I truly believe in God. And I believe that God kind of, I would pray and I would be like, okay, take this next little step. And so when I asked her, I'm like, hey, you know what? I have these sessions I would like to kind of try out on you if you're open to it. And she was like blown away. She's like, oh my God, that would be awesome. We did the photographs, and I had a vision for her photographs. And it's funny because every session of these that I've done, I've had a vision for them. And like, I believe in meditation, and I will meditate. And if I'm looking for an answer to something, I will meditate and ask for that answer. And I feel like the vision comes to me. And with her, she was in like a nursery, and she was holding clouds. And when I had this vision, the clouds were lit and the nursery was dark. So it kind of like the light was reflecting on her face. And when I first told her this, I said, hey, I'm thinking this for your shoot. And I was really scared again to tell her the vision that I had. And she said, oh my God, she said, when she died in my arms, her baby, she said, I had this vision that she was being taken into the clouds. And I was like, it gives me cold chills even talking about it today. But it was just following that intuition of even being scared, but being sensitive, still being extremely sensitive to her. And we created, her pictures are still some of my favorites. And she says that they're her favorites. And I've interviewed her several times since. And she says, those photos are like the mommy and me photos that I never got to have with her. She was only 13 months old. But that's like the photo shoot I never got to have with my daughter. So it's just, when you're able to do that for someone, you can't even describe what that does, Yeah,
that's an extremely powerful, intuitive connection, and good on you for following that through and like staying true to the vision, because that's a hard thing to tap into sometimes, and to trust and to listen to. But I think we all know, like you say, you have this knowing, you have this sense, and the more you can get clear on that. Like, I'm the same. I just really believe it's everything, and that it's our guide, and that it's our, the more you listen to it, also things may not, you might listen to it and things might not take shape how you think they're going to, but it always takes you to like where you need to be.
I think that I do believe that because we are spiritual beings, I do believe that we have everything we need inside of us. Like it comes in with not having fear and being able to trust ourselves, to trust that intuition, to trust that I'm being led in the way that I need to go to fulfill whatever purpose or destiny that I have. So I believe in energy. I've studied it extensively. I know, like, um, I went through a divorce 5 years ago, and it was a very stressful time. And I actually went to see some energy healers, and I feel like it was transformational to me. And I was a little bit scared at first because I'm like, I'm a Christian. I'm like, I believe that, does this really follow scripture? Does this really follow what I believe? But the more that I read the Bible, the more I'm like, it all fits together. It's like our whole world runs on this energy. And as humans, we have a connection. You're on the other side of the globe. We're in two totally different places, but yet our energy is connected. And it's a fascinating thing to me. I'm very intrigued by it, but I truly believe in it. And I believe that if we can trust that intuition and trust that energetic, because we feel it. You feel it when you connect with someone versus you don't, or something's off. That's intuition. That's their energy. That's what I believe anyway.
Do you have a specific or small challenge that you could recommend to listeners, particularly if they're stepping towards sharing their story in some way?
I mean, I would just challenge them, this off the top of my head, to really start journaling. Journaling is huge. I mean, you can use journal prompts, or you can just, because I do believe highly in intuition, a lot of times what I'll do is just start journaling. Like, whatever's on my heart, whatever's on my mind that day, I'll just journal it. And I think sometimes when you start to journal things and you start to write things down, it helps bring things out that I don't know if it slows your thought process down. I'm not really sure how it works, but I would say definitely journaling. And then I would challenge someone to meditate. It's hard to find the time because my mind is constantly busy, but I'm the type of person that needs to meditate because my mind is always on the go. But meditation, I think, is huge. And I think if you feel like you're ready to share your story, you can find every answer that you need. I will say this. Just because someone's ready to share their story doesn't mean that they have to share every single detail of it. And I think this is another reason that will hold people back too, because they feel like, well, if I did this in the past, I have to share everything, but you don't. There's ways to refine and make that story in a way that you don't have to share everything. That's like, if it's detrimental to someone else, it's going to throw, like if you had childhood trauma and it throws your parents under the bus, like you don't have to. There's certain ways that you can craft your story where you can still express yourself. You shouldn't stuff it. You still express it, but you can still protect those people that you may not want to just throw every detail out there. So I think that journaling and meditation will help you determine what parts you should share, what parts you shouldn't share. And then just finding someone that can help you navigate that. I would love to talk to anyone who is, wanting to share their story on any level, whether that be through artistic expression with photography or just through any modality or means. Because my heart is to help people. This is just something amazing and rewarding that I get to do in the process of doing that.
Yeah, it's really cool what you said about not throwing others under the bus necessarily, because people might just be too overwhelmed and in fear. But you're right. There's ways around that. And also your challenge, maybe meditation and journaling hand in hand. So meditate and then journal, or vice versa. Sort of do them together would be pretty cool. So yeah, that's an awesome suggestion. Yeah. Where can people find you and your work and the Transformation Through Trauma project?
Yeah, so I have a website, Transformation Through Trauma project. It's kind of long. the website it's a newer extension, obviously, of my business, but that has to do everything with the project itself. I am also on Instagram. I'm pretty active. I'm active on Instagram under both my personal name. It's the Amber Larkins. I'll have to send it to you.
No worries. I'll put links. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like either the or dash. I think it's the dot. Anyway, Amber Larkins. And then I have my business page, which is my photography, and that kind of incorporates everything. So my photography, my podcast, all the different things that I'm doing. We're also launching a masterclass. That Instagram is empowerography files. So it's like empower, like photography, empowerography files. And then I also we're launching like a masterclass for entrepreneurs that want to share these different types of stories, primarily for purpose-driven entrepreneurs that have these stories, and it's the why behind their business. I went through this trauma, I overcame the trauma, and the trauma plays a huge part in my why as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's wonderful because at the end of the day, it's helping people get their stories told and giving people a platform to share. And I will just say my vision, and this is my goal towards the end of this year, is to get enough people, contributors, to be in a book that tells stories, displays their images of, trauma to triumph. And then it's it'll be a compilation book. It's like a coffee table book that will have like a QR code that directs people to whatever services, whatever their business is, because this is how we grow as a community, is being able to connect with other people that are purpose driven, and you help me, I help you, kind of a thing. So I feel like a book is a great way to kind of put people's stories out there, excerpts of their stories, show visually their transformation, and then be able to show why they do what they do. And this is how you can contact them. So that's in the future. That's coming soon.
That's very cool. Well, thank you so much, Amber. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you for having me.